You can go years, maybe even your entire life without noticing this. You sit there lost in thought, running over memories, relationships, what's working, what's broken, what matters. It feels like you're thinking about your job, your family, the world, maybe even something noble or bigger than yourself. But if you look closely, there's something quietly threading through all of it, a constant undercurrent. You. Not in an obvious, how do I fix my life kind of way. Even when you believe you're focused on others, helping, planning, offering advice, your mind is still circling back. How does this make me look? How do I feel about this? What does this say about who I am? It's subtle, but it's there. And once you truly see it, it hits differently. This isn't just some psychological quirk. It's raw. It's clear. Every thought you've ever had has been about you. Not most, not some, all of them. Even the ones that seem outward-looking are always filtered through your sense of self, your narrative. You're thinking about your friend's heartbreak, but underneath that, you're wondering how it affects you, how it makes you feel, whether it reminds you of your own past, how it might shift the dynamic between you two. Every strand comes back to center. It's like this invisible gravity field, and at the center of it is the imagined me. Every thought, no matter how distant it seems, is pulled into orbit around it. And because that's always been the case, it doesn't register as unusual. It just feels like living. There's this passage in the Bhagavad Gita that speaks directly to our time. It refers to the Kali Yuga, an age marked by unrest, distraction, confusion. And in such a time, it says, there's one practice left that cuts through all the noise: repeating the holy names. The Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare Hare, Rama, 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 Hare Hare. To many that might sound devotional or religious. But if you look deeper, really pay attention, you'll start to see what it actually does. It doesn't feed your personal storyline. It doesn't support the mind that's constantly building and reinforcing your identity. It's not trying to fix you or make you more spiritual. It doesn't aim to polish the image of self. Instead, it gently redirects thought away from all that, away from the imaginary center, and towards something that can't be owned, toward stillness, toward God. And that's why it quiets the mind, not by shutting it down, but by changing what it orbits. When you stop thinking for the sake of self-definition, the mind gets quiet, not because it's forced to, but because it no longer has a job. The mantra turns thought in a new direction, not centered around you, but toward the unknowable, the open, the sacred. And that quietly, and without announcement, is surrender. Not the kind of surrender where you throw your hands up and declare it. That's still the mind trying to perform. This is something else. This is when the mind just lets go. Not in defeat, but in tenderness. It turns away from itself, not because it has to, but because it wants to. And when that happens, when you finally notice that every single thought is somehow about me, something softens. You ask the question, not from intellect, but from a real place. Who is this me? And there's silence, not an empty silence, not blank or dead, but a quiet where no answer rises, no image, no location, and yet something remains, something unmistakable. Not a thing, not a person, just awareness without a face, being without a name. And once the mind senses this, it starts to lose interest in its old patterns. Thoughts still show up, but they don't stick. They don't loop around the same point. They drift through like birds in a clear sky, coming and going without leaving a mark. Even the difficult thoughts lose their grip. You can still hear them. You still feel them. But they aren't yours anymore. They're just weather, passing. And somehow, that realization is both hilarious and beautiful, because you've been clinging to this sense of self for so long, protecting it, growing it, defending it, hiding it, and now it's gone. And not in a scary way, not in some dramatic fall, but in the most peaceful, natural way possible. Like waking up and realizing the person you were worried about in your dream wasn't real. And with that, the tension disappears. You breathe differently. You laugh. And everything feels lighter. There's nothing left to fix. Nothing left to chase. Nothing left to fear. Because the one who believed it was all about them isn't there anymore. Even after that moment of clarity, thoughts don't just stop. The habit doesn't break in a day. They come back. Sometimes they're persuasive. They say things like, "Okay, that was cool. Now what should I do with it?" And just like that, the mind tries to fold the insight back into the old narrative. It wants to claim the awakening. Own it. Make it part of the story. That's how deep this reflex runs. The mind doesn't mind truth as long as it can have it. Wear it. Turn it into identity. This is where people often stumble. Not because they haven't seen clearly, but because they don't notice that the idea of holding on to clarity is just another layer of the self. The ego, if it must, will dress up in spiritual robes to stay alive. Now I am the one who knows there is no one. That thought is still orbiting the same fake planet, the same center. The story's still playing. But here's the bright side. Once you really see that all thinking circles around a phantom self, it's not something you can unsee. It's like watching an optical illusion crack open. You can still see the image, but you know it's not what it appears to be. So when thoughts return, and they will, you notice their scent, their shape, their angle. They're always trying to do something for you. But now you don't fall for it. You let them come. Let them pass. No fighting. No clinging. Just watching. People sometimes ask, if I stop thinking about myself, how will I function? Fair question. But the misunderstanding is thinking that functioning depends on self-reference. It doesn't. You still breathe. You still talk. You still pay bills. Cook dinner. Smile at someone you love. But it's not happening for someone. It just happens. There's no longer a middleman pretending to manage it all. And here's where something really unexpected starts to unfold. Without that psychological self constantly narrating, everything sharpens. You start hearing things more clearly. You move through the day with a kind of grace that used to be buried under noise. Decisions feel cleaner, not because you suddenly became enlightened or got smarter, but because the inner tug of war has quieted. That boardroom of voices arguing over how you should act, what will make you look good, what'll protect your image. It's just not running the meeting anymore. Now there's just response, simple, grounded, unfiltered response. It's not robotic, it's not passive, it's alive but clear. And this is what teachers like Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta meant when they said, the person is not required. The body, the mind they've been operating since the beginning. You learn to crawl, to speak, to interact long before you had any concept of a you doing it. The sense of identity came later. It layered itself on top of what was already working fine. And when that illusion begins to fall away, the functioning doesn't stop. It actually becomes easier, more fluid. But here's the thing. Even after all this, the me doesn't just vanish for good. It's crafty. It finds new doors, sneaks in through the cracks. It doesn't shout, "I'm back." It's quieter than that. It shows up as concern or a subtle need to manage things again. It whispers stuff like, "Okay, how do I stay in this peaceful state?" And on the surface, that sounds wise. It sounds like care. But underneath, it's the story again. The loop rebooting. That's the pattern the self always wants to make a deal. If I just do this practice, I'll stay calm. If I meditate every morning, I'll stay awake. If I avoid certain people, I'll keep my center. But baked into every one of those ideas is the belief that you can earn stillness. That awareness is something you can secure like a reward. And that too is just more orbiting. It's the same cycle, dressed in spiritual clothes. And this is where a lot of seekers burn out. Not because the seeking itself is wrong, but because it's built on this hidden assumption that there's someone there doing the seeking, that there's a goal to reach, that you're on a journey with a destination. But none of that holds up when you look directly. The final knot is the idea that someone needs to awaken, that some imagined self can get somewhere called enlightenment. But thought can't take you there. Thought doesn't bridge the gap. It is the gap. And yet this is the twist. The loop itself isn't a mistake. Even that restless, grasping mind is made of the same raw presence. There's no real enemy here. The personal story doesn't have to be destroyed or fought. It just needs to be seen for what it is, a reflex trying to protect something that was never really there. Not a villain, just a familiar echo, one that no longer needs to be followed. And this leads to probably the gentlest realization of all you never needed to stop the thoughts. You only needed to stop confusing them for yourself. That's it. And when that clicks, something deep settles. Some call it bliss. Some call it peace. But it's not really a state at all. It's more like waking up and noticing that the bed has always been under you. You didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to change anything. There's no celebration, no big moment, just a quiet recognition of what's always been. And from that place, chanting a mantra, "If you still do it," is no longer a strategy. It's not about getting somewhere. It's just an act of love. You're not doing it out of obligation or because someone said you should. You're doing it because you're tired of spinning in circles. You're giving your attention to something deeper, not out of discipline, but out of relief. And thought, when it's offered like that, starts to quiet down on its own. It bows, not to an authority, not to a rule book, but to something it can't own, to presence, to the unspeakable. And even then, life doesn't freeze. The name on your ID still exists. Your body still gets hungry. You still get annoyed when your coffee's too cold. But it doesn't stick the same way. It doesn't accumulate. It's like there's no one there clinging to the moment anymore. So the moment comes and it goes. It flows. And life starts to feel feather light. You don't have to block your thoughts. You don't have to walk around in a perfect state of silence. That's not the point. What matters is this: you stop taking every thought so personally. You stop believing that every whisper in your head is about you. And once you really see what thought is just a looped commentary about a character that doesn't exist, something in you lets go. You're not reaching for a better version of you. You're not polishing the mirror anymore. You're just here, alive, and wide open. And sure, the mind keeps doing its thing. It'll generate memories, predictions, criticisms, fantasies, like a radio left on in the background. But now, you don't mistake the background noise for the main event. You're not confusing the echo for the source. And in that shift, a peace emerges that doesn't need to be explained. It's not made of anything. It doesn't rely on conditions. It doesn't need your attention. It just is, quiet, constant, behind everything, before the thought of me showed up. And after it fades again, that presence is still there. Always was. The mantra, the stillness, the insight. They don't need to become part of some master plan. They're not tools, not strategies, just mirrors, ways of remembering what was always right here, waiting without waiting. And maybe the best part is this: the thoughts don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to fight them. You don't even have to finish them. You just don't have to follow. You don't have to believe. They'll pass like wind on water, because now you know no thought can define you. No thought can carry you home, and no thought can touch what's already free. It's kind of wild when you think about it. You've lived your entire life with this idea of me sitting in the center calling the shots. It feels like a solid thing, a permanent character. It's had a name, a story, a past. It's been praised, criticized, hurt, admired. And yet, when you finally look for it, like really look, it's not there. You expected a core, a base, a watcher. But instead, you find this vast openness, a presence that isn't tied to a name or a face. And once you see that clearly, the need to defend, protect, or explain yourself just fades. Because what is there to protect? And this changes everything. You still show up in the world. You still speak, laugh, make choices. But now, it's not being funneled through this tight knot of identity. It's just life flowing naturally, without the commentary track running over it. There's no pressure to perform, no image to manage. You're not living for anything anymore, not for approval, not for validation, not even for spiritual progress. You're just living. And in that simplicity, there's so much space. You listen better. You notice more. You're no longer scanning the moment for how it reflects on you. You're just in it, fully, undivided. That's why conversations change. You're not half listening while constructing a clever reply. You're not waiting to insert your opinion. You're just there with the person, with the silence, with whatever's happening. And you start to notice that a lot of your past anxiety didn't come from the world. It came from the effort of being someone in it, holding up a version of yourself, curating it, fixing it when it cracked. That constant effort, that's what burned you out. But when the effort stops, the world doesn't collapse. The self doesn't need to be managed for life to continue. Life was always moving. You just thought you were the engine. Now, it's like you're watching the river instead of trying to steer it. And the beauty is the river knows where to go. It always did. That's what's so surprising. You thought you'd lose your edge, become passive drift. But the opposite happens. You respond faster, more clearly, because there's nothing in the way. The mind isn't second-guessing every move. The inner judge is gone. And what's left is directness. Clean, fluid response. This is what all the old teachers were pointing at, not some transcendent detachment, but just life, without the filter. The problem was never thought. It was identification. The belief that the thoughts were you, that every opinion had to be true, that every fear had to be obeyed, that every plan had to succeed. Now thought is seen as what it always was, a function, a tool. sometimes helpful, sometimes noisy, but never you. And once that's seen, even suffering becomes different. It doesn't hit the same. Sadness comes, but it moves through. Anger rises, but it doesn't explode. Fear whispers, but it doesn't paralyze, because there's no one there gripping it, no one bracing against it. And slowly, even the emotional weather starts to change. Not because you're trying to control it, but because the storm needs an anchor to stick around. And that anchor, the identity, isn't holding anymore. You might still get lost sometimes. That's natural. Old patterns don't vanish overnight. The self tries to reboot to sneak back in. But now it's visible. It can't wear the mask like it used to. You notice it. You smile. You let it go. And every time it happens, the loop weakens. Not through force, not through willpower, but through clarity, through seeing, again and again. And this is what's so disarming about the whole thing. It's not about effort. It's not a game you win. You don't get a medal for dissolving the self. You don't become special. In fact, that idea of being someone who's awakened is just another costume the self wants to wear. It says, "Look at me. I've seen through it all." And that voice might sound spiritual, but it's just trying to re-enter the scene, keep the story alive. And this is why the deepest clarity isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It just stays quiet. And in that quiet, you begin to see how simple it's always been. You never had to add anything to be free. You just had to stop grabbing the mask. Even the idea of freedom starts to shift. It's not something dramatic. It's not a moment you chase or a mountaintop you reach. It's not even a state. It's more like ease, a lack of tension, a sense that nothing needs to be held anymore. You walk through your life. You feel everything. You show up, but you don't carry it. That's freedom. And here's the sweetest part. The world doesn't need to change. People don't need to get you. Your past doesn't need to be rewritten. You don't need to fix every detail of your personality. You can just be. That's the release. And if the mind wants to come in and make it a method, if it wants to turn this into a checklist or a strategy, that's okay too. Just notice it. Watch it. Let it pass. Because now, you know you don't have to follow. You don't have to fight either. The thoughts can rise. The mind can chatter. The past can echo. It's all fine. You just don't have to believe that any of it says something about you. And the second, you stop believing that you're already free. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in the most ordinary, beautiful way. Like when a tight muscle finally releases, or when a noise you didn't realize was bothering you suddenly stops, and everything feels quiet again. That's presence, not silence in the room, silence in the holding. It's always been here, underneath the voice, beneath the tension, behind the narrative. And now that you've seen it, even just once, something in you knows. It remembers. And it starts returning again and again, not through discipline, but through love. And the returning, it's not something you have to schedule or force or turn into another task on your spiritual to-do list. It happens naturally, like breath, like the way your eyes soften when you're no longer searching. The mind may still be moving, but now it moves in a wider space. The mantra, if you still use it, isn't a tool anymore. It's not about getting somewhere. It's like whispering a name you love, not because you expect something in return, but because you've stopped orbiting yourself. There's relief in that, a kind of gratitude that doesn't need words. Each repetition isn't effort, it's surrender. not dramatic, not theatrical. It's just thought bowing, again and again, until it gets quiet on its own, until it gets tired of performing, until it rests. And from there, life keeps going. You still have preferences. You still have routines. You still forget where you put your phone. But you're not as entangled. You don't cling to every emotion. You don't spiral with every thought. You don't add weight where there doesn't need to be any. And this lightness, it's not fragile. It's not some brittle state you have to protect. It's strong precisely because it's open, because it doesn't resist. It lets everything pass through, even pain, even grief. So you grumble when your coffee's cold, you get tired, you get annoyed, but none of it builds into a wall. None of it gathers. There's no one behind it trying to hold on. And when that's seen, everything becomes so beautifully simple. You don't need to sit in silence all day. You don't have to meditate for hours. You don't need a perfect schedule. You just need to stop mistaking every thought as a message about you, because thought will keep happening. It's what minds do. They play out scenes. They plan, remember, evaluate. It's like a radio that doesn't have an off switch. But that's okay, because now you're not confusing the signal with the noise. You're not confusing the narration with the truth. There's a peace that's always been behind it all. Not a dramatic kind. Not the kind that needs fireworks or big declarations. Just this quiet, effortless presence that was there before your first thought and will still be here after the last one fades. You don't have to find it. You don't have to create it. You only have to stop looking away from it. And this presence, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be proven. It's not made of ideas. It doesn't demand your attention. It just waits. It waits without waiting. Like still water, reflecting everything, without clinging to any of it. Even the things that once seemed so personal. Your doubts, your ambitions, your pain start to lose their story. They're still there, but they're no longer being used to construct a self. They're just moments, passing weather, temporary shapes in an open sky. And this is why nothing needs to be suppressed. Not even your thoughts. You don't have to push them away. You don't have to clean the mind like it's a room that needs to be spotless. The thoughts can stay. You just don't have to follow them. And when you stop following, they lose their pull. They lose their stickiness. They pass like wind brushing across the surface of water, rippling it, but never changing its nature. Because now, you know no thought can define you. No belief can capture you. No memory can hold you. And no concept, no matter how beautiful, can deliver you home. Because you were never lost. That's the beauty of it. The realization isn't that you finally arrived. It's that you never left. That what you were chasing was never somewhere else. It was here, behind the seeking, beneath the fear, inside the stillness you kept overlooking. So now when thoughts come up, trying to pull you back into the story, trying to convince you that you need to fix something, prove something, become someone, you don't have to argue. You don't have to defeat them. You just see them, and the seeing is enough. You see that thought isn't the problem. Identification is. And once that's gone, thought becomes light. It becomes free. You can use it when it's needed. You can let it go when it's not. It doesn't run the show anymore. And what's left, what remains after all that noise has settled, is not some upgraded version of you. It's not the perfect identity. It's not a polished character. What's left is life, unfiltered, unburdened, wide open, You wake up and things are still happening. Your body still moves. The world still turns. But now, it's not being dragged through the lens of a self. It's just moving. Clear. Effortless. And when people ask you, how do I stay in that, you might smile. Because you know that the one asking the one trying to stay is just another thought. The mind will keep asking. That's fine. But now you see the loop. And because you see it, you're not caught in it. You're free, not because you escaped the loop, but because you stopped mistaking it for yourself. And that's the shift. Not a lightning strike, not a mystical high, just the quiet end of the chase. The mind keeps spinning. The world keeps changing. But something in you is still and smiling.